Hello and welcome to another episode of Gemstone Mine. I'm John, and today we have another lesson from cEDH. cEDH is a metagame within the Commander format that sits at one extreme with highly consistent, highly efficient decks. Not all cards are equally powerful in all formats, or even in all metagames, but there are lessons to be learned with how players are using some of the most powerful cards in Magic's history. And today, I want to talk about one of the new products that's coming out from Wizards, which I guess at this point seems like they are basically always releasing new products. But one that was announced recently really caught my attention, and I think it's going to be a good exercise for us to practice some of those lessons from cEDH that we have been preaching. And the product I want to talk about is the new Marvel Superdrop. Now, I'm one of the people who was a little bit skeptical during the first round of Secret Lairs with Universes Beyond, like The Walking Dead. But I will also admit I was very excited for the Warhammer decks, and I'm super excited for the Marvel Superdrop, as well as the full Marvel set, Spider-Man set, and this is the kind of stuff that I really enjoy. Now, if you're somebody who doesn't like buying Secret Lairs but want to pick the cards up later, you can always do so at our sponsor, FusionGamingOnline.com, your source for all your gaming needs. And I know that I've picked up some pretty nice shinies from them in the past. They are a great source for cards that you want to go ahead and pick up for any decks you're working on or just want to upgrade with a little bit of extra bling. Be sure to check them out. They sponsor a lot of content here on Commander Cookout Media Group. That's FusionGamingOnline.com, your source for all your gaming needs. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this today was another one of the programs that is on Commander Cookout Media Group, Commander Munchies. I got to sit down and hang out with all filler, no chiller Aiden Miller at Vegas. It was a great time. And we shared some thoughts on how the story is going, and I actually learned a lot talking with him. So if you're not watching Commander Munchies, it is one of the best 1 minutes you can spend in a day to get caught up on the Magic lore. That's the Magic lore, no plans yet for the Universes Beyond stuff. But I actually want to geek out a little bit about this Secret Lair announcement and the cards that are in it. So for those of you who aren't in the know, there is a new Secret Lair coming out, it looks like on November 4th, this Marvel Superdrop. And it's going to include 5 cards, as well as a number of reprints and reskins with things that kind of fit into the Marvel universe. And it looks like they're hewing a little bit closer to the comic books. So going through these, there is a reskin of the Arcane Signet as the Earth's Mightiest Emblem for the Avengers. That's fine. We don't really need a lot of Arcane Signets at this point. But I want to go through each of the individual layers with the individual legends and talk about those with you. My goal with this is to kind of explain how people think when they're evaluating potential commanders for cEDH. And in general, in cEDH, you're looking for one of two things. Number one, does the commander allow you to have a powerful value engine in the command zone? If it's a powerful value engine like Tymna, then often that's good enough to include just by itself. It is going to get you a lot of value turn over turn, and you don't have to worry about mulliganing so aggressively to get a value engine, which are often the things that cEDH games are won or lost by. Next, you may want to include a commander because they include a powerful combo in the command zone. One of my favorite commanders of all time is Malcolm, simply for the reason that it is a powerful 2-card combo with a card like Glinthorn Buccaneer. This enables you to not just generate resources with that commander, but also potentially win the game. I'm here for it. I mean, Godo is still an all-timer simply for the reason that it is a 0-card combo. Cast your commander, get to 11 mana, and just try to win. It's awesome. So that's another thing we're going to look at when we're going through these. Finally, you will still occasionally see commanders included simply because they unlock certain colors. This is the reason why Silas Wren is often partnered with Rograk. Rograk is the real powerhouse costing 0. Getting access to blue and black is just what the deck wants to really achieve that lightning-fast Grixis core, and Silas Wren is just the warm body that happens to do that. So I'm going to start going through each of these Secret Lair drops. I may comment a little bit on some of the reprints in it, but I'm mostly interested in the individual commanders. So our first Secret Lair is with Black Panther, green and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature human noble hero with first strike, and whenever Black Panther or another creature you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target land you control. And an activated ability, 3, to move all +1/+1 counters from target land you control onto target creature. If one or more +1/+1 counters was moved this way, you gain that much life and draw a card. So I'm not too impressed with Black Panther from a cEDH perspective, but if I were building a cEDH deck around this, I would look at the +1/+1 counters as a means to reinforce against removal like Orcish Bowmasters, which is one of the strong negative downward pressures on creature-based stacks in cEDH. Green-white is not a bad place to be when it comes to having a stack stack. Lots of powerful creatures in there. And importantly, Black Panther does not seem to, at least at first blush, depend on activated abilities for artifacts. So it's not crazy to build a deck with Null Rod, Stony Silence, Collector Oof to really try to hurt those artifact-based decks. From a lore perspective, that's really cool. You're pulling Vibranium out of the earth and you're making your army a lot bigger and stronger than anybody else's. Pretty much on point for good old T'Challa. I'm not sure that this would make the cut as a cEDH commander, but I think you'd have to respect it if it showed up at the table. The ability to essentially Orcish Bowmaster proof one of your stacks creatures or another value creature, that's not bad. Putting the +1/+1 counters on Esper Sentinel seems actually very nice. Gaining the life is not irrelevant for a stack deck. I don't think that's crazy at all. Drawing a single card at a time for 3 mana, I mean, technically, this is still potentially an outlet if you can get unlimited creature ETBs. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do in green-white, but you do have a meal, and I'm sure there's some way to do it, I just don't know what it is offhand. Still, cool secret lair drop overall. Black Panther is a pretty sweet card. Not sure this is the one that I'm most excited about though. Our next secret lair drop is Captain America, First Avenger, red, white, and a blue for a 4/4 legendary creature human soldier hero with 2 abilities. We're actually going to read the second one first, followed by the first one. So the second ability is at the beginning of combat on your turn, attach up to 1 target equipment you control to Captain America. The other ability is an activated ability. 3, unattach an equipment from Captain America. He deals damage equal to the equipment's mana value, divided as you choose among 1, 2, or 3 targets. So from a cEDH perspective, being in Jeskai is still a pretty decent place to be overall. You're competing with other commanders in the vein of something like the newest Narset, or even something like Elsha of the Infinite in terms of other Jeskai commanders, and Captain America doesn't have any obvious win con staple to him. He also doesn't have any obvious card advantage. But I did an episode a while ago about what we call sticky removal, a card that is essentially going to provide you multiple cards worth of advantage over time. And in this case, it would be the ability to deal combat damage based on throwing your shield as Captain America, which is actually super cool. Like, I'm geeking out a little bit over it. The hard part is finding an equipment with a high mana value that you do want to include. Ideally, then cheating on the equip cost, but usually that tends to be an inverse relationship. The higher the mana value, the lower the equip cost tends to be. Cheating the equip cost is still not nothing, and it is done at instant speed at the beginning of combat as a triggered effect. It's cool. In this case, the value that I talked about is actually going in and destroying creatures. They don't have to be on the defending player, and you can potentially destroy creatures on multiple people's boards. That said, I think the Orcish Bowmaster problem has already kind of reared its head a little bit, and being able to easily take out 2 or 3 creatures seems a little tough actually, because a lot of the X ones have kind of been banished from the format. I still really like the card design. I just don't really see how I would build around this in cEDH. I think you would want to have a Breach deck, certainly. You would definitely go with the Jeskai Breach package of Underworld Breach, Intuition, Lion's Eye Diamond, and Savine's Reclamation with Brain Freeze as your core combo to win the game. But Captain America himself would primarily be in there to try to remove speed bump creatures that are getting in your way, or to take out value creatures that your opponents are playing. I get why Captain America is red, white, and blue. That actually fits his personality pretty well, and we get to have red, white, and blue on a Captain America card that also fits perfectly. But I feel like that ability to get rid of creatures is something that green would actually really, really want if it could just take out an Orcish Bowmasters, something that the color often has difficulty with. Cool card, not one I'm super excited about in cEDH though. Next up is Iron Man, Titan of Innovation. 3, a blue and a red for a 4/4 legendary artifact creature human hero with flying and haste. also has a triggered ability whenever Iron Man attacks, create a treasure token. Then you may sacrifice a non-creature artifact. If you do, search your library for an artifact card with a mana value 1 plus the sacrificed artifact's mana value, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Iron Man is pretty cool, and I get why they put the non-creature artifact clause on there. Iron Man himself is an artifact creature. You could just sacrifice Iron Man on attack at instant speed, essentially playing this as a 5 mana value engine, play him out, swing, sacrifice him to his own triggered ability, and then go get a 6 mana value artifact. It is specifically non-creature artifacts. You can't do that with Iron Man himself. So what we'd be limited to is probably using one of our mana rocks that we're going to sacrifice and then go turn into something else. It is specifically a mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed artifact's mana value. So you can't drop a, let's say a soul ring, and then go get a 1-drop or a 0-drop. It has to be specifically a 2-drop. Now, offhand, I don't know of that many artifacts that would allow you to immediately combo off and get multiple attack triggers to then be able to kind of birthing pod chain through your deck. What I do kind of like is using this to sacrifice a 1-drop artifact, maybe something you got off of Urza's Saga, a Soul Ring, a tapped Mana Vault, something that you don't really care too much about, and then immediately turn that into an Agatha's Soul Cauldron. There's probably a lot of combos you can do. The downside to this is that since it is coming into play tap, you cannot immediately put a +1/+1 counter on something to activate it. There's probably a few other potential combos. At 3 mana value, if you sacrifice something with a mana value of 3, which, to be fair, there's not a lot of in cEDH, you can then immediately turn and get the 1 ring, which is what I would be most interested in trying to do. But I can't think of a ton of artifacts that see a lot of play in cEDH that could immediately turn into the 1 ring. I guess one place you could start looking would be at something like your Cursed Mirror, which does see quite a bit of play, and that can turn into the 1 ring pretty easily. I just don't see any 1-card combos with it. Now, at its base, swinging in and getting a treasure token every turn, untapped treasure token too, is pretty sweet. You still do have to get to 5 mana, but I don't think it'd be too difficult in a dedicated Iron Man deck. And you always have the ability to just trade up one of your mana rocks for one that produces more mana pretty easily, and then just work your way up the chain turn over turn. Blue and red also aren't hurting for extra turn spells, so there's a possibility that that's the way you wind up winning, is off of 2 attacks and then going to get something useful. I would be interested to try to brew around with Iron Man. I think that is pretty sweet. That's got some legs for cEDH. I think it's the most powerful one we've looked at so far. Now, for the one that people are kind of most excited about, and probably the most powerful one, we have Storm, Force of Nature, 1, a green, a blue, and a red for a 3/4 legendary creature mutant hero with flying and vigilance, and whenever Storm deals combat damage to a player, the next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn has Storm. That is cool. I don't necessarily know that it fits her lore that well, but frankly, if we have a Storm card and she doesn't have Storm printed somewhere in her text box, I get it. And it is a cool effect that has been living rent-free in my head ever since this card was spoiled. I've been trying to mess around with different ways to make this work in cEDH. One way you could take advantage of it would be to try to double up on tutors in a way similar to what we saw in the Krark Thrasios Clown card deck when we had Cobblepot on the show a few months ago. Storm being able to potentially double up those tutors means you can tutor up a 1-card combo, 2-card, 3, just go for the win that way. The downside to it is that Storm herself does not provide a lot of extra mana for you to potentially go off with. You can't, for example, play a ritual during your pre-combat main phase as a way to juice up the Storm count, then go through combat, keep the mana in your mana pool, and then storm off in your post-combat main phase. Fortunately, you could potentially just drop some artifact-based ramp in your pre-combat main phase as your quote-unquote ritual, go to combat, swing with Storm, get the trigger, and then in the post-combat main phase, use that untapped mana rock to then try to go for a win. I would really like it if Storm somehow touched white in her color identity, for the ability to then cast a Silence as your spell in the pre-combat main phase in order to protect your combo later. There's a couple of options in green-blue, things like Defense Grid come to mind. You could also potentially drop Dosan the Falling Leaf. I'm not in love with those cards per se, but it is a way to give yourself protection in the pre-combat main phase, go to combat, and then hopefully win without any interaction in the post-combat main phase. The cards that I'd be most interested in storming off with Storm would be something like a Neoform, for example. That would allow you to turn Storm into potentially 1, 2, or 3 5-drop creatures. I had some time to talk with Phoenix of the Mind Sculptors for some advice on this, and what Phoenix pointed out was that if you can get your Storm count to 2, that would give you 3 copies of Neoform. Neoform from a 4 to a 5 would then allow you to get Kiki Jiki, Zealous Conscripts, and Terror of the Peaks. Regular 2-card combo Kikis don't work great because you've already had to go to combat and deal combat damage in order to win with Storm. So Terror of the Peaks would be a necessary slot to take up in this case. You could also potentially go with something like Eldritch Evolution, which gives you a lot more flexibility, and sacrifice Storm at a Storm count of 2 to maybe go get something like a Shia Will of the Wild plus the Quirion Ranger for that combo to get unlimited green mana. The issue is that Storm doesn't have an outlet printed on her. So you would likely need to get to a Storm count of 3 and then also get something like Thrasios Triton Hero to actually dump that mana into to turn that into a win. Now, interestingly, that also works with something like Natural Order, which would allow you to sacrifice 1 green creature, Storm, to get 2 or potentially 3 other green creatures with which you then win the game. It's pretty slot intensive, and I think that's the thing that's going to be an interesting challenge when building this in cEDH, but I definitely think there's a list here. I'm just not sure what it is offhand. Our final Secret Lair commander I want to talk about is Wolverine. Best there is. 1, a red and a green for a 2/2 legendary creature mutant berserker hero who says double all damage Wolverine would deal. And at the beginning of each end step, if Wolverine dealt damage to another creature this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on him. Finally, 1 and a green, regenerate Wolverine, which means the next time he will be destroyed, instead, tap him, remove him from combat, and erase all damage dealt on him. I'm very happy they brought back Regenerate just for Wolverine. It's kind of hard to have Wolverine without Regenerate printed on him. I also like that he has double all damage and not just double strike. Double strike would be more powerful kind of at the get-go, but it means that you can potentially give him something like Team or Battle Rage to double all damage dealt to him with then adding double strike on top of it. That's potentially a lot of damage that Wolverine can dish out. My issue is I don't necessarily think this is a great cEDH commander. It's a lot of damage. I think that Wolverine is going to have a pretty easy time knocking people out of the game. It's perfect at that. The issue in cEDH is that generally you don't want to knock people out one at a time. You want to try to win the game all at once, and Wolverine doesn't really offer an easy route to that. I don't think Wolverine necessarily has what we would need for a cEDH deck. I expect it is still going to be a sweet deck at many commander tables, and I'm going to try to build it for sure. I just don't think I can make it work in cEDH. I also just wanted to point out that on the Rite of Passage card, which is included in the Secret Lair, it has both Wolverines, Wolverine Logan as well as Wolverine Laura Kinney, and as somebody who has been enjoying X-Men for many years, I'm pleased to see the other X-Men getting some love in the Secret Lair too. So that's kind of the analysis for those Secret Lair commanders, and I hope you learned a little something going through them with me. If you have some thoughts on them, I'd love to hear about it. Let us know about it in the comments on YouTube, where we are part of Commander Cookout Media Group. You can send us an email, gemstonemindpodcast@gmail.com, or you can add us on Twitter, where we are GemstoneMindMTG. Until next time, I'm John, and this is Gemstone Mind.